in 1966. That came from one of my informants. But lately, I've changed my mind, which I'm allowed to do every night at midnight.
I hope so.
I don't think we're on the moon. Now, it's possible we are, but there's a reason. First of all, we never went to the moon in the first place. Apollo was a sham. It was a series of recordings. It was a series of all what practicing they did put together to seem like 6 different missions. But there was so much evidence now that anybody that believes that we went to the moon are just not informed. The biggest thing is the fact that the moon's gravity is 70% of that of Earth's, not 1/6, as most physicists will tell you. And the problem with that is Newton's second law is incorrect. Kepler's third law is correct. And when you use Kepler's third law, you can figure out that the moon's gravity is 70% of Earth. The second way of proving it is to use the Borealis-Newton law of inverse square, where all you need is distance and size and the neutral point to figure out the difference in gravity between the Earth and the moon. You don't need to use density. Now, when you're figuring that out with Newton's second law, you're using density, and it's just a guess, and by golly, what the density is. Now, they tell us that the moon's density is 3.34 centimeters cubed, and they tell us that the Earth is 5.5 centimeters cubed, and they use those as finite or true densities to figure out the gravitational force or the gravitational pull of the Earth against the moon. But both of those are wrong. The assumptions for density is wrong, and the way of figuring it out is wrong.
When you spoke about this in the first segment that we did, you really went through thoroughly the 9/11. I want to go back to one part. What happened to the planes of the people who supposedly took off on a plane? Where did those people go?
Most of them were government employees. They're hidden somewhere, have changed lifestyles or under different names, do different things, and still work for the government. There are several people who actually were passengers who were killed somehow, but we don't know how. But there weren't that many. There weren't 300 people killed in those airplane crashes. Very few, and I would say maybe less than 10 people were killed, or I should say murdered, when 9/11 happened. The ones that really got the short end were the people in the Twin Towers trying to get out. And I don't know what that real number is. It's supposedly up there about 2,800, but we don't know. What we do know is that anybody that complains just goes to the government, and the government gives them a couple $1 million and has them sign a piece of paper that says that they will never discuss this with anybody for any reason forever as long as they live. That's why we can't get any information out of those guys.
Wow. That right there tells us that there's something amiss, that something is completely off with the whole event. Because why would the government tell those people, we'll give you X number of $1 million, you're never to discuss this? Again, it's just basically silencing people and paying them off.
Because people are going to say, no, I wasn't in any airplane that crashed, or I didn't have relatives that crashed. They're still around.
Got it. When we spoke last about the Van Allen belt, I went and I read an article by NASA that said that the Van Allen belt, you can get through it and it's no big deal, basically. So what is the story? What is the truth about this?
It's much more dangerous than people are led to believe, that you would need 2 meters of solid lead to protect you from the radiation from the Van Allen belt. We have nothing that could do that. Now, we have mechanical objects that we have landed on the moon to take pictures and stuff like that can get through the Van Allen belt and can be protected, but you cannot protect astronauts from that kind of radiation. It would kill them right away.
NASA's information then to the public is completely false.
Yeah, I heard an interesting thing here one day as somebody was talking with a guy from NASA, and the guy from NASA says, it's not that we lied about a few things here and there. We lied about everything. I mean, nothing they said was true. Nothing they have said was true. Everything they've said about the planet, the universe, the earth, everything is fake.
Let's talk about Perry Poulter.
Yeah.
Talk about her book.
I haven't checked with her lately. She lost her son here about 6 months ago, and she was not feeling too hot. The next book she was going to write was going to be on the moon, and I think I gave her a little too much information to maybe go ahead and tackle it, because there's a website run by some idiot named space.com, and we got into an argument about what the gravity of the moon would be using the Bully-Aldous-Newton law of inverse square. And what mainstream science comes back with is you can't use that because it's a three-body problem and it's far too complicated. And by three bodies, they mean Earth, Moon, and Sun. Well, Perry is a genius at mathematics. So she took the day that Apollo 11 allegedly landed on the moon and figured out the gravity, figuring it out, assuming a three-body problem, Sun, Earth, and Moon, and figured out that if they had landed that day, the gravity of the moon would have been 70%.
Wow.
Which it is. That's why it has an atmosphere. Its atmosphere is about equal to 18,000 feet on Earth. If you want to go to the moon, you have to go through a week's decompression, just like if you want to climb Mount Everest. You have to take it in 5,000-foot increments and stay a week or two to get your lungs and system accustomed to that lower pressure of air. You couldn't start one day and just walk right up. It's a 3 or 4 week program where you take 5,000 feet at a time and go back and forth and get your lungs and your system accustomed to that. Same thing with the moon. So then when you're adjusted, then you can go to the moon and you don't need any space helmet or anything like that. You can just go out there and breathe normally.
Your interest in extraterrestrial life began in 1985 with Jimmy Doolittle talking to your mom, right, about MJ-12.
No, my interest began when I read Bud Hopkins' book, Missing Time. And then it was increased when Bill Moore and Jamie Chandra came out with the alleged Majestic 12 papers. And I wanted to find out whether Majestic 12 was true, because nobody had heard that it was true, and nobody had heard of Majestic 12. And so I got my mom, who lived in Reno, to call General Doolittle, who was then retired and living in Carmel Valley in California, and were very good friends and had been good friends for years and years and years and years. And of course, Jimmy Doolittle's wife had passed away several years before, and he was always delighted to hear from my mom. And so I decided that the only way I was going to get to the bottom of this thing was find out what Doolittle had to say about it, because he was in it up to his ears. He was not an MJ-12 himself, but he did a lot of work for MJ-12, and he knew a lot about the saucer deal. So I got her to call him one morning and talk a little short, how's things, how's the weather and everything. And then she said, you know, Jimmy, John's gotten himself into something that I'm not sure is good, but I wanted to know from you, is Majestic 12 real? And he said, yes, Moy, it is, but I can't tell you anything about it. So that was it for me. I was on my way. If he said it was true, then that meant that the papers that Bill Moore had, although they may have been faked, they contained true information and were true. And so that's when I took my famous truck ride, and I went to Arizona, Colorado, New Mexico, and just drove around talking with different people, different military people, different civilians, went to different leads, went to Dulce, and did a lot of research, which people don't do these days. All they do is go to the Internet, and if it's not on the Internet, they don't know anything about it. Very few people read books these days. They'll look on the Internet and get a summary of it,